So let's start digging deeper into our showcase now of previous zines that we've printed and how each of those conquered the design brief of creating a stunning zine. So we're going to start here with 4 different A5 solutions to the zine. So I think the first thing that we're going to touch on is your decision between, do you want a self cover where all the pages on the zine are printed onto the same paperweight, or do you want a thicker cover? So we've got 2 here that are self cover and 2 with a thicker cover. So if we look at the thicker cover to start with, so this one here has a 300 gram uncoated cover and 115 uncoated for the inside pages. You can see that the cover does bounce open. As we spoke about earlier in the choices, we can say yes, it will definitely sit flat, but in reality it won't. Once you open the cover of a zine, the paper tends to lend itself back to trying to flatten itself out and to sit flat again. So we can really squeeze this as much as possible, but it's still not going to go flat. That's one drawback of having a thicker cover. Obviously the pro of it is it feels more substantial. People pick it up. You can probably get away with charging more for the cover price because it feels like a more substantial publication. So both of these have got a 300 gram uncoated cover, matte lamination both sides, and 115 GSM uncoated for the inside pages. So this one is 20 inside pages and swirl is 16. Ever so slight difference in the thickness there. They're both coming up about 2 mil thick. So uncoated feels nice and tactile, gives a really nice finish. It's a muted finish. When people ask for a matte paper, they really mean uncoated, but it's bright white, so it does your images justice. Flip through, it's great for illustrations. So 300 gram, nice and chunky for the cover, and the inside pages flick through really easily. So bright colours, they jump off the page still. They're slightly more muted than they would be if it was silk because it's uncoated, so the ink soaks in a little bit more, but because it's bright white, really nice finish. Lends itself really well to photography, and you've got the crisp back cover. The alternative then, as we have here, is to print all of the pages onto the same paperweight, so they're all onto 100 gram uncoated. So your standard photocopier paper that you get in the office is around 80 GSM. So 100 GSM is a slight jump up on that. 115 that we add here feels noticeably thicker. We can go as thick as 170 for the inside. So this zine here is 40 pages altogether onto 100 gram uncoated. And you can see because it's got slightly more pages, 40 in total, which is 10 sheets folded in half then stapled, that there is a slight curl in the middle. Again, we're not going to say to you that we're going to be able to get it to go completely flat, because in reality we won't, but it adds an extra charm to it, makes it collectible. It's a tangible thing that people can sit on the tube, they can read when they get home in the evening, and it's a really nice feature. Height here is 76 inside pages. So we've said that 40 pages is pretty much the max for wire stitching, but Haight gone for 76, which is the absolute limit. And you can see here the effect there, big curl on the spine and a lot of bounce. It was coming up about 4 or 5 mil thick, this. Really free-flowing layout on Haight. So I think we're up to issue 4 or 5 now. Great for illustrations and great for photography. So this is on 100 GSM Evolution uncoated. So Evolution uncoated is slightly off-white as well. It's 100% recycled, so it ticks that box. So if you want a 100% recycled zine, go for Evolution uncoated. Interestingly, Haight on later issues did actually step up and do perfect bound. This one's 120 inside pages, which is really too thick to wire stitch, so they had no option but to go for perfect binding, which is slightly neater. And compare the two here. One's probably 4 or 5 mil thick, and the most recent issue is 7 or 8 mil thick. So if you're going to go for Evolution uncoated, one thing to consider is that if you do then laminate the outer cover, it does actually make it not recyclable. So if you wanted to go for a white background on the front cover, there'll be no chance of the ink cracking, and that's a good solution for an Evolution uncoated zine. And it does mean that when people have finished reading it, the whole thing can still be recycled. So we've got 4 choices here. So we've got 300 gram uncoated for the cover, which does bounce open a little bit, but does feel more premium and more substantial when people read it. Or we've got a self-cover zine where all the pages are printed onto the same paper stock. On the front cover here, we've got quite a distinctive masthead. Cracking, yellow is really becoming quite a favourite colour of mine. Really, really nice zine, this one. Hate has a free-flowing layout. We've got a mix of imagery and we've got text in there. I'll be slightly careful with which pages I open in this one, but Hate is a cracking zine, and it's up to issue 6, I think, now. Sometimes we do print zines for corporate clients as well. So this is for Adidas and Stella Sport. They wanted a zine to publicise their latest fashion range. Really nice typography. It's very stylish. Typography and images and photography both working together. Creates an impressive looking zine. And this went down really, really well at the launch of that particular season's collection. So there are 4 choices for an A5 zine. Let's take a step up then, and let's start looking at zines that are slightly larger than A5 up to and including A4. So at the back here we have Speed Queen, and then I've overlaid 3 other zines which are bespoke sizes between A5 and A4 to highlight some really quite interesting and intriguing sizes that you could go for. It makes the reader's eye work a little bit because it's an unexpected size. It's quite compelling. We have Speed Queen at the back here, which is A4. So that's 297 high by 210 wide. Next up we have There, which is 215 wide by 270 high. So it's a couple of centimetres shy. On top of that, we can then have a look at Flyboy by Reese Wooten and Harrison Wallace, which is 270 high by 190 wide. So 190 wide. And then we have The Jungle by Rob Pilley, which is a really great photography zine depicting the jungle camp in Calais. And Rob's book is 250 high by 176 wide. So this is actually B5, so authentic B5 size. So all 4 of these are the same price point. So any bespoke size larger than A5 up to and including A4 is the same price point. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of flexibility. You don't have to worry about adding an extra centimetre or so. It's going to change the price. Anything up to 297 by 210 is going to be the same price all the way through. It makes it easy. I don't know why you charge for bespoke sizes, but we certainly don't. So Speed Queen is a really nice photographic zine. A4 means that the double page spreads have a real wow factor. They're quite fascinating. They're captivating images. See, a lot larger, 2 or 3 times larger than they are if they were A5. Allows you to have loads and loads of white space on the page and draw the reader's eye into the images. So it's A4. On this particular one, we have a 200 gram uncoated cover, slightly thinner than the 300 gram before. So 200 gram would class as a thin card or a really, really thick paper. 200 gram for the cover, 115 for the inside pages, and we've got 20 pages altogether, so 4 plus 16 pages. Remember, it's a 4-page cover because onto the thicker stock is the front cover, the inside front cover, the inside back cover, and the back cover, making a 4-page cover. So 4 plus 16 gives you a neat bind down the spine. With it being A4, it does sit relatively flatter than the A5 one does because the weight of the cover actually pushes it down, but 200 gram uncoated also helps with that. 300 is probably the standard. We do probably print 90% of our zines onto 300 gram, but 200 just flops down a little bit neater. So that's Speed Queen. We've got There, Then, which again is a really, really nice photography zine. They've actually gone for quite an off-kilter spec this time, which is 160 Evolution uncoated for the cover. So that ticks the recycled box. You can't actually see the colour or the grain of the paper on the cover on this one because it's printed completely, but it is 100% recycled. It doesn't have lamination on there as well, so it retains its recycled aspect. The inside pages, to give the photography a vibrance, to make them more stunning and more impressive, we've gone for 170 silk for the inside pages, so the colours really jump off the page. Sensational images in this one, really nice photographic zine. Some of the pages have a white border around the edge. So let's just discuss the border here in a little bit more detail. So here we've got a 12 to 15 mil border around the edge of the page, which is a really good idea. If you do a really tight kind of 2 or 3 mil border, and this applies for other books, postcards as well in particular, if you do a 2 or 3 mil border around the edge, when we come to trim the paper, obviously if you print in 100 copies of a book, you're going to have like 1,000, 2,000 sheets on top of each other. Paper's a natural material, there's always a little bit of movement. So if it moves by a couple of mil and your border was only 3 mil anyway, then it might end up being 1 mil on one side and 5 mil on the other, which then really looks like a mistake. So having a bigger border here, like 12 to 15 mil, just gives it the image a little bit of room around the edge of the page. And if there is movement when it comes to trimming, which there always tends to be, then the movement is less obvious. You might end up with 13 mil at the top, 11 mil at the bottom, which is certainly better than 5 and 1. Something to consider with the layout. But here we've got a mix of borders. We've got some pages which have a landscape photograph on there and a larger border at the top and the bottom. And we've got some pages which are full bleed. Again, full bleed images are absolutely fine with Ex Why Zed. We don't charge anything extra for your ink going right to the edge of the page. More full bleed images. So 170 GSM silk, the inside pages of this photographic zine. Next up, Flyboy, and like I said earlier, we really don't print that many gloss zines and gloss comics, but this is an absolute cracker. So we've got 300 GSM silk for the cover with gloss lamination. So the imagery really jumps off the page. It becomes the focal point. Beautiful, shiny cover, first class. When you open it up, on this one, as an intriguing contrast, we only have black ink printed throughout. So black ink on these illustrations really is extraordinary. It's quite striking. Flip through, the black is really punchy. So if you've got a black background on your artwork, you can set it up on the CMYK slider as 30% magenta, 30% yellow, 30% cyan and 100% black. And when it comes to print, it'll be really jet black. If you're going to print text, keep that as just 100% black. But for a black background, you can definitely make it really punchy. So this gloss zine is 270 high, 190 wide, which again, is quite a fascinating size that falls between A5 and A4. It's out of the norm, gives you something extra to play with, and it's an extra additional thing that you can promote to your readers. Refugee camps around Calais, titled The Jungle, but the photography is impressive. It's sensational photography, and we're printed here onto 150 silk for the inside pages. 130 is the standard, so 150 is a definite step up. People say, oh, can you print it onto thicker so you can't see through it? Even if you went for 300 gram on the cover and held it up to the light like we're doing here, you'd be able to see through. So flat on the desk, there's barely any show through. If you hold it up to the light, you are going to be able to see the image through from the other side. You would, even if you went for 170 gram, which is the max that we can staple in. So Rob's publication, like we said, is B5, so that's 250 mil high by 170 mil wide. 200 gram uncoated cover, so it flops down nicely. It sits flat and flush to the text block, and 150 gram inside for the text pages. We've got matte lamination over the front cover as well, which is always a good idea. If you don't have lamination on there, then the ink along the spine can and usually does crack. It's the first thing that people see. Never judge a book by its cover, they say, but if it's got scuffing on there because you didn't put lamination on there, people probably will. Eye-catching, striking and dramatic images, photographic zines, absolute winners. You can sell them for anywhere between £5 and £10 a copy. And this again is a bespoke size, which you can print for the same price as up to A4. So last few selections of wire stitch zines, and here we're going to highlight again the difference in the sizes that you can go for. So Speed Queen at the back is A4. Obviously all of these are portrait, so Speed Queen is A4 portrait, and then we have the Northwest, which is B5 250 by 176. We've got So Young, an early incarnation of So Young, which is A5 210 by 148, and we've got Orange Zine, which is A6, so that's 148 by 105. So you can see neatly how they all fit together. Obviously the major difference is the actual physical amount of content that you can get per page, depending on the size that you go for. If you're going to go for a larger zine, you'd be able to get away with selling it for more. But then if you go for a higher number of pages and you go for something bespoke, it's something unique for the reader. And again, you can command a higher cover price. So Speed Queen at A4. We've got the Northwest, which is a photographic zine from Preston is My Paris. "24 pages altogether onto 115 uncoated. So it sits neatly together. Cover image sits flush to the page. You don't have to worry about the cover bouncing up because all the pages are onto the same paperweight. Full colour all the way through. And it just shows you here what can be achieved with zines, really. There are no rules. We don't conform to any rules when we're printing zines. You can add your content, and if it's engaging enough, radiant and vivid, captivating, people will go ahead and they will buy a copy. An early edition here of So Young issue 8. We're up to number 24, I think now. So originally started at A5. So this is an illustrated music zine, which has done particularly well, our longest running publication. The guys go out and they interview bands every couple of months. And this is a really, really successful zine. This particular one of So Young, again, it's got 200 gram uncoated cover and it doesn't have matte lamination on there. Slightly risky, but it looks like we've got away with it. We've got 44 inside pages, so there is a bit of bounce on there. It's pushing the limits of stapling, but it looks neat and it's handy, and it does retain a zine feel. When we speak in a minute about perfect bound zines, they are a little bit more corporate looking. This is an old school zine. I guess back in the day, a lot of zines were A5, like we spoke about. I guess back in the day, a lot of zines were A5 because you'd get a sheet on your college photocopy, you'd print it and fold it in half. A4 sheet folded in half makes A5. If you're worried about your images being slightly more muted or uncoated, if you go for our house uncoated, they are still bright and vivid. So Young, the final one we'll look at is Orange Zine, which is a really neat A6 publication. Cover onto 300 gram uncoated, so that's chunky, and 115 uncoated for the inside pages. We've got a combination here of poetry, photography, and really nice illustrations. So just a handy little zine to hand out. Might be able to sell these for kind of £3 to £5 each, but if you print enough, you'll be able to get them for well under £1, so you've still got a nice bit of wiggle room there and a bit of margin to actually reward your creativity and make some money off the back of the project. So A6, 4-page cover, 28 inside pages. It's got 300 gram cover, so there is a good chunk of bounce on this one. We saw the bounce earlier on A5, less so at A4, but because of how rigid A6 is, that is going to flop open like that. Do expect it. Let's just try and prove by squashing this down. Let's really, really push it down. Oh, that did help a little bit. but once the cover's opened up again, that is an inevitable consequence of printing onto card.